this.
Yeah, that looks awesome.
We have a little stand over here that maybe might.
Jacob, you
Yeah.
want me to do my ad read first?
I'll do mine first since it's longer.
Okay. Oh, I should tweet this out.
Yeah, Jason, do your job, bud.
All right. It is tweeted.
Awesome.
All right. So, you ready?
Yep.
All right. In 3, 2, 1, go.
Cozy's looking for entertainment this weekend can catch the next Aquarius event at the historic train depot on Blaze Avenue in downtown Bay St. Louis. The event will start at noon this Saturday and run until about 3. All musicians and comedians are welcome to sign up. Bring your folding chairs or blankets to enjoy the free entertainment. Remember, whether you are an entertainer looking for gigs or production assistants or someone that needs entertainment for an event or venue, Aquarius is here to make it happen. Follow Aquarius on Facebook and Instagram to keep up with their latest projects or to contact them about bringing yours to life. And Jason will tell you about our newest sponsor.
Landmass, built from the skeletons of old AOL discs, produces talented turdlickas and food for the children. Check them out at landmassentertainment.com and Landmass Comedy on Facebook.
Now for the joke.
Ooh, it is Wednesday night, and it is time for the Open Micers podcast. My name is Jason Robbins.
I forgot to think of a cool quip, but my name is Jacob Craig, and our guest
Tell them about the
tonight-
guest tonight.
Oh, I will, buddy. Our guest tonight is an author, illustrator, and musician who has worked on titles such as The Muppets and Nancy, as well as more than 60 children's books. You can come meet him in person at Pensacon in Pensacola, Florida, May 21st through 23rd at the Pensacola Bay Center. Please give a warm welcome to Mr. Guy Gilchrist on the show tonight. How you doing today,
Woo.
sir?
Oh, great to see you guys. And thanks for the plug. Yes, we want to get everybody we can over to Pensacon.
Oh yeah,
Absolutely.
I've got a couple
know,
of couple of panels to do over there at Pensacon.
Oh, do
so
you? Oh, great.
hopefully I get to meet you in person while I'm over there. This will be great.
It's been a minute since I've been to Pensacon. It's been a couple of years, and I'm really looking forward to it. Man, I have such a good time at that con, and that is it's such a warm and friendly town.
Yeah, Pensacon's one of the best. I've been to a lot of cons, and I think Pensacon's probably the most fun I have at any convention anywhere. And such cool guests, and just the whole city. Like the entire city is basically turned into one giant convention. So no matter where you go, there's always something going on. And so if you're interested in going this year, it's the 21st through the 23rd of this month right here. It's in what, two and a half weeks from now?
Something like that. It's coming up real close.
Yeah. So tell us. I mean, I don't even know where to start. Let's.
There is a lot to get
You
into.
just do your, ask, I'll
you-
try to figure.
You start, Jay. I don't even know where to start. Like your list of
Okay.
credits is like ridiculous.
Yeah, I want to start actually with the Muppets comic book series that you produced. And of course, I do I do research for all of our guests that we interview. So please excuse me if I say anything wrong. It's the internet's fault. It's not my fault. It happens a lot. But I read somewhere that you actually worked on the Muppets comic book series 6 months after the show ended. So what was it like to pick up on such a hot property right after, such a big show stopped?
Well, it wasn't a comic book. So that's that the internet is messing you up.
Yeah, it happens more than you would think.
So there used to be a thing called newspapers.
I've heard of those. Yeah.
Out of trees, cut differently, and then they would print on them. Anyway, Jim, in his third year of doing the Muppet Show, began to think that after 5 years, I'm going to shelve this. This is going to, because I want to do some other shows and some other movies and stuff. But of course, the world was in love with the characters. And so he began a search. He wanted to have a comic strip that could be in every newspaper in the world, in every language, in every country. But it took him 2 years to find the person, and that person wound up being me.
Wow.
So, yes, we debuted in September of 1981, but the the show to the public was still out. We were in the fifth year, because although production had just stopped, that people were still seeing first run, shows, and so to the public around the world, it was we were entering this two dimensions of the comic strip in every newspaper in every language, but it was adding on to the legacy that was going to be, the Muppet Show. It, so as far as what did it feel like and all of that, I mean, oh my gosh. I mean, working with Jim every day was amazing.
So
And
what I hate to
yeah,
interrupt you, but what was the process of that like? Was that sort of where did Jim give you the ideas of what to do in the comic, or did he actually like say,
no,
okay,
no, uh, no. Well, the process changed over the years, but basically, the reason that it took Jim so long to find someone, I think, was probably he was looking for someone who was a really big Muppet fan that also could maybe write and draw. And my audition process for Jim took a year. I was sending in strips for a year before he hired me.
wow,
So he had a pretty good idea. And I had met with Michael Frith, and so I was writing a lot of stuff. And then when I finally got the gig, and this would have been, about 10 months before anyone ever saw it in September of 81, I started working with Jerry Jewell, Jim's head writer. And Jerry and I would talk frequently. Then I would write and draw the strips, and I hired my brother Brad, my younger brother Brad, and as a writer as well. And he helped out on coloring the Sunday pages. And what we would do is I would draw as many as I possibly could, and then I would send them all to Jim, and Jim would look at them, and then and decide whether these were the ones that he wanted to go with. And so it was a very cumbersome but also very personal thing.
yeah,
And Jim loved comic strips, but you can only imagine um, him taking all of that on with everything else that he had. It
yeah.
was a tremendous amount of stuff. So he must have really believed in me and in my brother Brad. And we were my daily person, my daily boss was Michael, and and Michael, of course, was a great barometer of of where we would go and what we would do. And when you think that 80 million people were reading it every single day, and I was just a kid, and how scared could I possibly be? And I was, but the idea was that if I could please Jim with what I was doing, then I felt like, I was on my way. So I didn't get all of that scared about it being all over the world. I just wanted Jim to be happy with what I was doing.
So as far as
Yeah, and
you
you
said
must
you
have been a
oh, I'm sorry. I was just going to ask you. You said that you would do a lot of different strips and send to them. Does that mean there was a lot that were left sort of on the quote
Oh,
unquote
yeah.
cutting room floor?
Oh gosh, yeah. Well, the process would be that that I would write joke after joke after joke, and I would do rough drawings, and I would do them like on typing paper.
Okay.
And I would mail those in to King Features. They were the syndicate,
Mm-hmm.
and they would look at them, and they would look at them too. But they would also go to Jim and to Michael and to Jerry and also Frank Oz. And so everyone would have them. And as I said, it was a very cumbersome thing because we were trying to get as much input into it as we could, but also there was this nasty thing called a daily deadline, and there
Mm-hmm.
couldn't be a hole in the paper. Uh, so, but after about a year of doing it that way, and many of those months we weren't being printed yet. We had started working on it a year or so before, and as I said, I already had a whole bunch of jokes that they had seen from this very lengthy audition thing. So time. After about a year and a half or 2 years or so of uh, of this thing where Jim was looking at it every day and all of that, and I would get phone calls in the middle of the night from London, and he would leave me these wonderful messages and stuff, and it was just a great, crazy time. Then there came a point a couple of years into it where Jim said, "You know the characters as well as I do, and they're yours now."
Wow.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
Must have been an amazing feeling.
Oh,
You
it really was.
you and your brother must have been two very young men at this point. I mean, how much experience did the two of you have before you got this gig?
Well, he was working at a Cumberland Farms, or something, when I hired him. He had zero experience. Um, but I brought Brad along with me. I didn't have any experience in doing a daily comic strip. I had been trying to get a daily strip, doing my own ideas and mailing them into the different syndicates for a couple of years. My experience at that point was doing a comic book for a weekly reader, and it was a funny animal comic called Super Colonel. And that was the artwork that King Features saw of mine to give me the audition. I had no experience whatsoever. Jim hired the least qualified person. He must have looked for 2 years through all kinds of geniuses until he found the one kid that had no experience whatsoever.
So
And he hired me.
what was your training for your art? Did you go to art school or anything like that, or was it just completely self-taught?
No, I don't consider it self-taught. But no, I didn't. I didn't go to college. I went to work. Uh,
Oh.
uh, but I started off when I was about 12, uh, doing work professionally. Not very well, of course, but professionally. And I started lying to my mom and taking the train into New York City when I told her I was doing something else at a very early age, so that I could go to like the very first and second Comic Con there ever was in New York City. As soon as I found out that there was such a thing, and then taking my art around to any artist that would look at my stuff, and also DC Comics. This was mid 70s, early 70s, and DC Comics had like a search, where they were looking for people and stuff. I brought my work to New York knowing that I would get lambasted pretty good, that I was a punk kid, but I wanted to know how good did I have to be. So I had a real thick skin, and I would work for anyone that would hire me. And most of the time, I didn't get paid, but I got a lot of experience in a very short time. Uh, and by the time I was 16, I had gotten my first job in New York City. That paid on time and all of that, because I'd worked for a few undergrounds and stuff that didn't pay me, and but then I got a job actually doing a Disney coloring book for Whitman Publishing, and so that was a big deal for me, even though, of course I couldn't sign my name to it or anything like that. I was working for Disney, and that was at 16. So that was a big thrill. Yeah, I got all of my experience by being an idiot. Let me explain. So when you're young and you don't know anything, and the world is smaller because, there was no internet or anything. So the world is smaller. Um, you have this innocence, um, and you have a desire, in your heart. And there's you want to go and do these impossible things, and if you actually explained it to anyone, like your parents or something, they'd go, "You're nuts," and they tell you, "Don't do it." But of course, I didn't do any of that. I just started, and I got turned down by everyone.
Yeah.
But I also got accepted, here and there, and then you learn to swim with the big fish.
Yeah, there's a thing that Kevin Smith said once that I kind of carry as my mantra. For if you want to do anything cool in life, you have to have an unreasonable amount of have a reasonable amount of unreasonability. And
Yes,
I think
yes, it's
that's, yeah,
true.
it sounds like that's kind of what you had. It was just like you just went for it without really thinking about, you know, the odds of it really.
Yeah, well, I mean, it's rock and roll, man. It's if you ever really thought, like, if you ever really thought about, yeah, the odds of being, of getting a job, oh my gosh, as a comic strip artist
Mhm.
and then doing the Muppets, well, the odds would have been zero.
Yeah.
I mean, like, there aren't enough numbers. I mean, lotto is a better shot for you. um but that wasn't what I was thinking about. My goal was, I wanted to be a successful cartoonist. And so I wrote my own stuff, I lettered my own stuff, I inked my own stuff, because I didn't know any other way to do it.
Yeah.
And uh, every time I get shot down, I'd put that aside, and I'd create something else. I wouldn't ride the same horse, over and over and over again into the ground. I would put that aside and say, okay, let me give this a shot. Okay, you know, um, it's like that, guys, with anything. Like, anybody that ever made it in music or in acting or in anything that came from nowhere to do it, they've got the same story. They knew so little,
Hmm.
but had so much want and
Yeah.
desire that, that eventually it happened. It's like it has to be oxygen for you.
Yeah.
It just does. And if it is, then no one can stop you. You're gonna be a success.
So, what was that moment like? Like, what was going through your head when you landed the gig of doing the
Well,
Muppet Strip?
it was crazy because, as I said, so I had been auditioning for almost a year. Um, and Bill Yates, the head of King Features, was the conduit that every once in a while would reach out to me and say, well, there's some movement over there, at Henson, and I don't know if that's good or bad. You see, the thing was that no one asked me to keep on auditioning. It was my idea.
Mm.
See, my thought process was, until they tell me I don't have the job, I'm going to keep trying to get it. And it kind of turned into almost a joke to everyone in my life, that I would do my day job, which was doing the comic book and children's books for Weekly Reader, and then I would write more jokes and draw more strips for the Muppets and send them into New York. So then one day the phone rang, sort of out of the blue, and it was late in the day, and it was Jerry Jewell. And I hadn't had any contact with the Muppets at all in months and months and months, besides going and meeting with Michael and the people, with publishing, Henson Publishing. And so a phone call from California from Jerry Jewell was like, wow. Okay, so this is how it went. Is this guy Gilchrist? Yes. Well, this is Jerry Jewell. So like, Jerry Jewell? He says, yes, Jerry Jewell. And I said, you mean like Jerry Jewell, like Juhl, like on the crawl at the end of the Muppet Show, like the head writer? And he must have been thinking, oh my gosh, what a rube, you know? And he goes, yes, 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 Jerry Jewell. And then he went, and I'm a very important person and I don't have time for this. And he started putting on this sort of like LA thing. And it was very funny. You know, he was being a character. And I said, well, Mr. Jewell, this is an incredible honor. Why are you calling? And he said, well, let's talk about Gonzo. And he started talking about Gonzo and this idea that he had. And then I just jumped into it and I said, but then in the middle of it, I went, excuse me, but Mr. Jewell, this is really wonderful, but why are you calling? And he said, well, didn't Michael call you? Didn't Jane call you? That's not Jane Levin. That's Jane Leventhal, not Jane Henson. No. Oh, well, you've had the job for a month. You're And so I'm sitting there in Unionville, Connecticut, in a garage studio that I had made, all by my lonesome, realizing that every dream I ever had just came true. And I have to pretend to be an adult and talk to Mr. Jerry Jewell about my new job for the next hour and a half because he's a very busy man. So I just contained, you know, and did what I was doing and taking notes and stuff and pretending to be a pro and pretending that dreams come true every 5 seconds. And then I hung up with him and then I went crazy.
I can only imagine.
You know, running around, like, I felt like passing out cigars like I just had a kid, ran in and, told my wife and my brother was renting the other side of the house from me. So he wasn't too far to go tell, and but I wanted to run into my tiny little Connecticut town screaming at the top of my lungs. But instead, after I told them, I went back in the studio and I just started writing. I started working.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, you were already a month behind, so I don't blame you for going ahead and trying to start working.
I always was. And the thing with the process of the comic was different than anyone had ever done. And King Feature said it was impossible. But Jim had this idea. And then eventually I did meet Jim, and I know you'll probably ask about that. But see, King Features was the biggest in the world, and they had Beetle Bailey and Blondie and lots of other stuff. And they also worked with Disney, and they had Mickey Mouse and Donald Duck and stuff. And so and the way the comics worked was that the English language version would get done, and then it would be sent into New York, and then they would translate it into French and Spanish in the reruns, and then they would stack up a whole bunch of English, Spanish, and French stacks of them, and they would mail them around the world, and then they would be reprinted. Well, Jim didn't want that. Jim believed that the Muppets belonged to the whole world. So he told King Features that the strip that I wrote and drew in the United States today for the Daily News in New York was going to be the same one they were going to read in Helsinki, and the same one that they were going to read in Bangkok and wherever, And King Features is going, no, that's not how it works. And then he's going, oh, but I think it can. And they're going, no, Mr. Henson, you don't understand. And he's going, oh no, I think I do. And okay, I've got to go make a movie. Michael, Guy, talk to them. This is how it's going to be. And then he just bops around in his, green sneakers and takes off. And, jumps on the Concorde and goes makes a movie. And all the people at King Features are going like this. And they're watching $1 billion walk out the door in earth shoes, with a knapsack. And they're like, and Jim's like just going, oh no, we can do that. And so it became the only comic there ever was that it was in every language and everyone read the same one. But that was an undertaking that had never been done before. So I was working 6 and 7 and 8 months ahead instead of 6 weeks ahead. Because, this was before anything, computers or anything. And we had to do all of that through the mail.
Yeah, I was going to ask you, how far ahead do you usually have to stay? Even with not with the Muppets, because you did Nancy as well.
Yeah, well, with Nancy, and I did Nancy for almost 23 years. So we went from mailing the strip and stuff in the mid and late 90s to scanning it and sending it in digitally, in the 2000s. And over the years, by the time I retired from Nancy, I could be working 2 weeks ahead. The normal thing was to be around 6 to 8 weeks ahead, and that was time. And that was even back in the 80s. That was plenty of time, 8 weeks. But yeah, we were more like 8 months with Muppets.
So what was your writing process like? Did you just kind of, like you said, you wrote a bunch of jokes and you would do like kind of thumbnails and send them off, but it's got to be, nerve-wracking to be like, I have to write a joke for every single day, but on top of that one joke, I got to do this many others to send to Jim. Like, what is that like?
Well, it was the job, so I didn't think about it. I didn't think about it as being a chore or anything. And to be honest, most of the stuff that by the time Jim got it, he liked it. There were, I wound up being an okay editor of my own work. And I had my brother writing as well. So I could look at ideas that he had and we could collaborate on story ideas and send them in. But me being the artist that was going to do it, I would be the first editor saying, this is going to work or this isn't going to work. We butted heads more with King Features than we did with Jim. Jim usually was going along pretty good because by the jokes, the personalities of the characters were coming through in the material that we were doing. King Features, however, didn't like the idea of ongoing stories. And, they wanted a joke a day, and we wanted to give them a joke a day, but their main idea was that Piggy and Kermit would be like Blondie and Dagwood. Let's have Piggy and Kermit every day because that sells papers. But to me, I wanted to do like a week of Veterinarian's Hospital and 2 weeks of the swine track, Pigs in Space, and be telling a story, and then all of a sudden have a Muppet news flash, and I also liked doing jokes where we were parodying the idea that we were in the paper. Yeah. Like Kirk would be walking along and smack into the side of the panel and going, "It's difficult to be in a comic strip. I keep forgetting," or Miss Piggy in curlers and everything, not realizing that it was her day to be in the strip. Things like that. Animal eating the comic strip and eating the newspaper. And King Features would go like, "What is this?" I'd go like, "It's the Muppets."
Yeah.
parodying what they were doing, and but you couldn't. They had a difficult time understanding. Well, we want to do Muppet Labs for a week. We want to do this, we want to do that, skits like that.
Yeah.
But so we butted heads more with them than with Jim. We were pretty much in sync, the Muppets and I. Yeah.
Yeah. Sadly, we don't have a lot of time left here on the Zoom because me and Jason
I'm
are very...
so boring. I know.
No, me and Jason are very cheap
on,
people,
man.
and we can't afford a yearly subscription. So with the time we have left, I want to touch on you. You mentioned Nancy, which you worked on for 22 years, which is longer than I've been alive, by the way. Don't want to make you feel old, but
I already know. I mean, no, I'm one of your guests where you go, oh my gosh, is he alive?
I think that about Jason every week.
He thinks that about me every week. So.
But so what I wanted to ask you, I mean, you've worked on Nancy long enough to raise a kid and send them to college. I mean,
Yep.
what was it like to say goodbye to that character in that comic strip?
Actually, it wasn't difficult.
Really?
Yeah. I mean, when I first took the job, I kind of thought maybe this is going to be 2 or 3 years. But having been in the business before, and realizing that Nancy was losing papers when I took it on, and then knowing that when you change the artist, sometimes that's not good. And the other syndicates will like pounce on that comic and try to get it replaced by one of theirs. So originally, me and my agent, we were sort of looking at each other going, boy, if we make 6 months, this will be great. And but then fortunately, people seemed to enjoy the version that we were bringing back, this sort of Ernie Bushmiller-esque, one. And so I did it. I kept having these 5-year deals. They picked up my option. I did 5 years, and then they said, "Hey, things are going great," and they gave me another 5 years. And after about 10 years or so, Brad left the strip, and I was writing it on my own. And I enjoyed having the voice, to put out things and tell stories. But I was about done. Just in that, when you're writing a never-ending story, and that's what a comic strip is, and it takes up a lot of your time, to do this and to do it as well as you can. You also have other stories that you'd like to tell that don't fit into that particular thing. You want to take your voice and put it into other characters and other situations and do other things. And so I had never even dreamt past 5 years on Nancy. And so I really enjoyed my time on it. But by the time it was done, I was all good. I was all good. And I, and put it away, and I put it away, and then just dove into back into doing children's books, which is what I had been doing before I had started doing Nancy.
That's understandable. Sadly, we only have about 5 minutes left, Mr. Gilchrist.
And I just wanted to say that I'm at the age where I was the perfect age to actually read the Muppet comic strip. When I was a kid, I was born in '77, so I was just a couple of years old. But I've loved comic strips my entire life, and I did my own web comic for a while. That's
Did you really?
Yeah, and it's me and one of my comedian friends. We used to do one called the Nerd Tunes webtoon for a while, but it's just hard to keep coming up with jokes. Like I don't know how you did that for so long, coming up with jokes every single day.
I'll tell you, and it's hysterical, because what winds up happening, it's a very strange thing, because if you wind up having that brain that writes that stuff for that long every single day, and you're also writing extras, that aren't getting in because you're looking for your best stuff, when I walked away from, when the Muppets was over, right? When the Muppets was over, that next year, I wrote and illustrated 20 books.
Wow.
I mean, I had math and stuff, but I wrote 20 books in 12 months, 20 children's books, the Tiny Dinos. I like, you get to this thing where your engine is
Yeah.
revving at a certain rate, and you just get creative that way. I'm still like that,
Yeah.
it's I don't even have enough platforms to stick all the stuff that I write. I still write so much.
Well, it has been an absolute pleasure to have you on the
Yes.
show, and I can't wait to
Yeah.
meet you in person. I'm definitely gonna come up and say hi
I
there
hope
at
you.
Pensacon. And any last words there, Jacob, before we leave?
Yeah, of course. You can see Mr. Gilchrist May 21st through the 23rd at the Pensacola Bay Center at Pensacon. He has been a fantastic guest. Obviously, you have so many great stories to tell people, and I'm sure you're going to have a lot of great art for people to look at there as well. Where can people find you online, Mr. Gilchrist?
Uh, we have the Facebook page, and the Facebook page and the website is A Guy Gilchrist Production. And then you can find me at Guy F as in Frank, Guy F Gilchrist on Instagram, and it's Guy Gilchrist on Twitter. And we're very, very active on all of those social platforms. And, we put up a ton of art, and we do live streams and all that kind of fun stuff.
Fantastic. Well, we'd love to have you back on the show again. We didn't even scratch the surface of everything we'd love to talk to you about. So if you ever would love to come back on the show, we would love to have you.
Okay, well, yeah, well, let's just start another episode right now. Okay, cool.
Yeah. And
Anyway, you great, and I'm really looking forward to meeting you when I get to Pensacola. Please come over and say hi.
absolutely. So let's go ahead and get out of here. If you would like to email us, you can email us at nerdcave, at
No.
openmicerspodcast@gmail.com. We're at openmicers on Twitter and openmicers podcast on Facebook. And that's going to do it for this week. So let's go ahead and get out of here.
For the latest episode of Nerd Tunes, I think there's Nerd Tunes or something.
Yeah.
I heard about this crazy new webcomic.
Yeah. That was a fun episode. Thank you so much.
My pleasure. That was a blast, guys. Thank you.
But you guys have a good evening. Thanks everybody for watching on Twitch, and I will be back in 20 minutes.